So first off, like understand that you're not alone. There are hundreds, probably thousands, millions, probably actually people out there that understand what you're going through. There's always someone who can understand. A really big one I see is go and talk to an adult. If like you find yourself in a really difficult situation, talk to someone you can trust, whether it's a parent, a relative, a coach, a like teacher, anyone. And if you think it's necessary, and it probably is, try to talk to your school administration. It kind of, depends on the grade. But honestly, like talk to someone in your school who can help you and who can help you distance yourself from that person.
This is Your Purposeful Life, and I'm your host, Adrian Starks. I'm a speaker, podcaster, narrator, writer, and entrepreneur. On this podcast, we're taking a different approach to the understanding of purpose because it's not a one-size-fits-all. There will be a variety of guests expressing their purpose through the human mess we call the human journey. These conversations will guide you to a better awareness and understanding of your unique purpose in the daily life of mistakes, changes, and challenges, and how to put that purpose into action, bringing you more experiences of success, fulfillment, and achievement on your terms. Let's go on this journey of purpose together. Welcome back, everyone, to Your Purposeful Life, and I'm your host, Adrian Starks. Today, I would like to welcome on a special guest, Shanti Hershenson, to the podcast and community. Shanti, how are you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good, and I'm excited to have you on to talk about what you're doing with your writing career and how you are as a person. And just to make sure, you're 15, right?
Yeah, I just turned 15.
Amazing. You just turned 15. That is amazing. Did you do anything special for your birthday?
Sort of. I had like a family party, and then I had a birthday party a few weeks later, like separately. And I just kind of chilled out. I have a twin sister, so we just did like whatever we wanted.
Oh, okay, that's great. That's great. Well, Shanti, I'm glad that you were able to be here on the show today with us and to talk about the topic of anti-bullying, but also how you use that as a purpose to write, to speak up, and to help other young authors do the same. I'm going to talk about Shanti here. Then Shanti and I, we're going to get into a good conversation because we got a lot in common. I just could not wait to talk to you today, Shanti. So let's go first with your bio here. Shanti Hershenson's first two novellas were published when she was in the 6th grade, although her writing journey started long before then. Ever since she could hold a pencil, marker, or crayon, she was creating stories. I like that. They started from pictures, mere scribbles, and eventually turned into captivating tales. She lives in California with her parents, sister, and furry friends. Besides writing, she enjoys skateboarding, Beyblading, free running, falconry, and of course, reading. She writes a variety of genres, including science fiction, fantasy, and historical fiction, although she mostly sticks to sci-fi. She advocates for anti-bullying, and you may find her at open mic nights performing her spoken word poem, Needles and Thorns, which is also about the struggle of bullying in middle schools. Shanti, welcome to the show today.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm happy to have you. And you and I, right off the bat, when I was reading your bio, I realized we had something in common. We have the open mics in common, as well as the anti-bullying, as well as writing. So we're going to be good friends today on this show. But I also realized that you're from California. What part of California are you from?
So I was born in Los Angeles, and I lived there for 11 years. And then now we live in San Diego.
Okay, San Diego. How is San Diego this time of the year?
It's really nice. It's pretty hot, but it's not as hot as LA, so that's good. It's a really nice place to be.
So I want to talk about this journey that you're on. It appears that you have really pulled a purpose out of what you have gone through in your life. And yes, you're 15 years old, but you've experienced so much. And for people listening today, wisdom does not come from the fact that you're a certain age. Wisdom comes from experience. And there's people like you, Shanti, that have experienced a lot, and your wisdom is shining forth through your writing. You're from California. I mean, you mentioned you grew up a lot in LA and you moved to San Diego. Did at any point in your life, any of these areas have an impact on who you are today? I
think little. Definitely growing up in LA means that I'm like kind of nervous to go outside sometimes. But I I think in like little ways, yes. Particularly, like the places I've gone to school have left impacts on me, and like the places I lived. I think especially in my writing, it's very evident. First novel I ever wrote, By Unlock, it mainly takes place in LA, or at least the prologue takes place in LA. The rest of it's kind of subtle. And I have books now that take place in San Diego, and those are the places that I'm especially familiar with. So then there's like little references to where things are, and I guess that's an impact. Otherwise, it's like it's so subtle. I'm not sure.
Now, the biome lock book that you wrote, that's
Yeah.
about an invasion series, right? An invasion
Yeah.
species, or okay. How did that come about for you? How did you say, I'm going to write a book on an invasion series?
So I wrote Biomlock. It was the first novel I ever wrote after those two novellas, and I wrote it during the
Okay.
pandemic. It's about an alien invasion that leaves these characters captive in these like artificial biomes to kind of like a prison, but nature prison,
Mm.
fun. It's very much heavily inspired by the pandemic, I think. It wasn't supposed to be when I started writing it, however. I mean, if you look back and read it now, it's very much like reminds me of that. And the characters are all around the age that I was. I think I was 12 when I started writing it. The characters are 13. And ultimately, it's this really kind of story about isolation and how these characters dealt with it and how they rose from it.
I love it. And you use that pandemic as a way of being inspired to write. And this is what it means to be a writer. I feel that you're sharing this with us, that sometimes you may start off writing a certain way, then it may change based upon what you're currently feeling emotionally. And for the young listeners that are listening to you today, Shanti, that is a great inspiration for them to know that if you're writing, it can change along the way. You don't have to stay stuck with just one topic and say, I've got to do this, but you can actually change it. That's quite impressive. So with the writing, obviously that was something that you used during the pandemic, but this writing has been around for a while for you. Like, for instance, since you were a young toddler, you were holding crayons in your hand and doing scribbles. But what I find so compelling about your writing is that you used it as a way of helping to shine light on something that bothers a lot of people across the world. That is bullying.
Yeah.
And I mentioned that we shared a common theme, open mic. Can you talk a little bit about your Needles and Thorns open mic dialogue, or this poem that you have that you're using for anti-bullying?
So I created Needles and Thorns when I was in the 7th grade. I believe it was for a project actually that we had to do in school. And one of them was we had to make a poem that would gouge emotion. And I didn't know what I was going to do. And just for some context, the previous year I had been bullied really, really horribly. It was absolutely horrific. I was traumatized. And then the pandemic hit. So I was this weird switch from being like bullied a lot and having to deal with that to just being isolated at home. And so I wrote this poem. And I wrote it about how my school administration wouldn't listen to me about the problems I had and how they just told me it was just middle school and how like there's nothing going on and that you're just like crazy, right?
Oh my goodness.
So I ended up performing it first for that project. What I remember very vividly is that my teacher actually pulled me aside and asked if I was okay because of how dark the poem was for a 12, almost 13-year-old. And then I think the principal might have called my mom about it. I'm not sure about that. I just vaguely remember there being a phone call related to it. So it was in many ways a kind of retaliation against my school administration, but also as a way to kind of raise awareness and use this poem as an outlet. From then I started performing it at different open mic nights. And it's been probably my biggest hit with all my poems. It's definitely one of my favorites. It's the one that whenever I think of my open mic nights, I always think of this poem.
Needles and Thorns. And I like how you talked about your story of going to get help, because I think this is where a lot of problems are happening with kids, is that they're wanting help, but they feel like no one can hear them or no one's listening to them. And
Yeah.
although those particular people in that moment in time didn't support you, there are school systems that they do have the support. And I want to shine light on the fact that they need to listen more to what you are saying, to what the students are expressing through their artistry, because that tells a lot about what they're going through. And I like the
Yeah.
fact that you decided to use that as a way of not getting mad at the teachers and saying, well, no one cares about me, and you go into a corner. But you said, no, I need to radiate this out. I need to shine some light on this. I need to make sure that I am heard.
Yeah.
I'm going to go back here, Shanti. When I was a middle school, I witnessed bullying too. And what happened with me was I was body shamed a lot. I was a chubby little kid, and I changed as time went on. But I got so scared of being bullied that I wouldn't even go to the cafeteria to eat during lunch. So what I would do is I would grab my food and I would run and hide somewhere. And I found refuge in the library. And I talk a lot about this story to students about this interaction between me and the librarian, but I found my purpose in the library where I read books. And that's when I became inspired by poetry, by philosophers and artists. And I was like, I want to express myself that way. So you and I have similar themes of how we use the bullying to express who we are as artists in writing and speaking. And I also did spoken mic. I had a poem called, if I can recall the name, Untold Courage. And I also had a poem called Time. And I was known for those poems at my open mic. But enough about me, Shanti. I just wanted to share this common theme that you and I have about bullying. What advice do you have for other teenagers who have been bullied?
So first off, like understand that you're not alone. There are hundreds, probably thousands, millions, probably actually people out there that understand what you're going through. There's always someone who can understand. Really big one I see is go and talk to an adult. If like you find yourself in a really difficult situation, talk to someone you can trust, whether it's a parent, a relative, a coach, a like teacher, anyone. And if you think it's necessary, and it probably is, try to talk to your school administration. It kind of, depends on the grade. But honestly, like talk to someone in your school who can help you and who can help you distance yourself from that person. And if the school is not listening, find an adult who can help you and find an adult who you can talk to. Because if you have like a school that's not listening and no adult to talk to, that I can imagine that would be very difficult. The entire way I got through middle school was because I had more than one adult who I could talk to when the school wasn't listening, and I had adults that I would go with to go complain to the school. So find someone you can talk to. And another thing is like if you're currently being bullied, find a way to distance yourself from the situation. Talk to someone. If it's like, because what I find often is it's like a friend that, or someone who's like in your circle of friends that's the bully. At least in my case, that's how it was. So find a way to distance yourself from that person. If you have a friend in that circle you can talk to your friend, but also just find other people to hang out with.
This is such powerful information, Shanti. I cannot
Thanks.
thank you so much for providing that. I like how you said you found adults. Okay, you're not listening to me. All right, I'm going to go get some adults here. And now you're going to listen to us.
Yeah.
I love that alternative because often at times when someone doesn't listen to us, what do? We shut down and we go away and we don't say anything. But you were resilient. You kept going forward. And I like how you said support. Right now with mental health for everyone, support is critical.
Yeah.
And we need that. And I love your strategies. What advice or what things do you think the schools could handle better with bullying? I mean, you talked about what people can do for the bullying perspective. They're being bullied, but what can schools do better? What do you think is something that they're missing right now?
One thing they're missing is that very often there are kids who are always scared to come forward about what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And there may be concrete evidence that something is going on, but the kids may not be able to come forward about it. So if there's evidence that there's something going on, screenshots, whatever, handle it. Because I think a lot of schools are like, well, we don't see it happening. Those students are coming to us, so it's probably not happening. And then it's a sort of like denial that's really, really powerful, and it's really, really destructive. The other thing is that schools do need to keep watch better. There's too much of, oh, well, I didn't see it happen. If a school knows that there is a student causing problems, they need to keep an eye out. Of course, I'm not saying like, go like stand right behind that student at all times, but watch, pay attention, and understand that like things are going to happen that someone may not like be able to see, and then handle it effectively immediately after. I think too often schools are like, well, we need to talk to them. We need to hear their side of the story. And of course, that's important. But also, like, bullying a lot of the time isn't a like two-sided conflict. And it shouldn't be treated as that. And like handle things accordingly as well. I think a lot of schools, they have stuff written down in their handbooks and then they never follow it. So come up with a set of rules and a set of punishments that are fair and actually keep to that.
I agree with you too. It's not a two-sided conversation. Usually bullying is from one side, one person trying to hurt another. And one thing I've learned later in my life is that hurt people, they hurt people. And bullying
Yeah.
is actually something that comes from whatever it may be, their home, their setting, whatever is happening that they feel they don't have control over. They're trying to come to school and control something. That is trying to make someone feel little about themselves, which is not a good behavior. It shouldn't be tolerated, and it needs to be addressed. And I find that a lot of times schools are very busy and there's so many students, but when you have students that you know they're coming to you, or if you are hearing things that are going on, it needs to be investigated. And there are cases where you use yours constructively. I like that. And there's cases where some kids don't use it constructively. They
Yeah.
go the other way with it. And the fact that you are saying that, look, this is what we need to do, love that. I want to go back to what you said about the needles and thorns when you had that one teacher that pulled you aside and they said, hey, this is kind of dark, this poem here. Are you okay?
Yeah,
I love the fact.
Yeah, she was one of my favorite teachers. It was really cool. She was like, "Are you doing okay?" On the other hand, my principal just called my mom and was like, I don't like this poem. I don't actually remember what she said. I don't, it was about something related to that project, so I'm assuming it was the poem oh, wait. So I had to write an artist statement attached to that. And I made my artist statement, like, I listed all the things that happened to me as my ending. And I was like, is this just middle school? I'll let you be the judge of that. And she got so mad about it.
I love it. See, you challenge them. You challenge their perception. And that's what's important. It's about challenging and opening up people's minds. And the fact that whether they considered it dark or not, it was your expression of what you were trying to get out on paper that you could not express physically to someone in person who was not listening or who was unable to understand what you were going through at that time. And this is why writing is so important, which I want to kind of spiral into the writing perspective now, because as teenagers that are out there, you may not want to write a book, but I think writing is an important exercise for you to do to express your feelings. And what you're doing, Shanti, is not only have you used your writing to express your feelings, you've used your writing to sell books on TikTok. You've used your writings to promote things, to create novels. I mean, it is amazing the amount of work that you're doing. How have you managed to write so many books, first of all? Let me get the number here. Is it over 16 books that you've written so far?
I've written 20 and I've published 11, but book 12 is coming out in a few days.
Okay, so over 20. So my numbers were off. I apologize on that. I was thinking about your age and I was like, wait, you're 15? Yeah. Okay, so over 20 books. How have you managed the time to do that?
So I've written 20 books, and it's honestly, like, a lot of people are really shocked about it, honestly. It's not even a secret. I write every single day. I write 1,000 words every single day. And I've been doing that since I was in 6th grade. Actually around pandemic. I don't know when, but I just say since I was in 6th grade, because that's what is kind of basically it. And really 1,000 words is all it takes. However, like over the summer and on some days I do write more, but just having that minimum goal amount for each day and then sticking to it is extremely essential. The other thing I do often is, sorry, I'm about to sneeze. Sorry. The other thing I do often is when I'm like writing a book, once I'm done with the first draft, I actually let it sit for a bit and I go and I write another first draft, and then I go back and edit that draft or edit whatever draft is needed. Because what I find is when I'm editing a draft, most often, sometimes it's not this, but when I go to straight up just to editing a draft, I'm going to miss a lot of errors, and I'm going to miss a lot of plot holes that I didn't notice otherwise because I'm still like freshly thinking about it and I haven't like forgotten some of the things yet. So almost when you take a few months off, it's like you're approaching it from a reader's perspective and you can really actually like get into the book. The other thing is just I like writing down plot points for each book that excite me to write, and it just quickens the process. Because if I'm really close to this one scene that I really want to write, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to rush to this. And that actually just happened yesterday, where I got to write a really good scene, and I just remember being extremely excited about it and being like, oh my gosh, I love this book. So it's kind of a mix of motivation and just practice. At this point, it's like I can't complete my day without that 1,000 words. I mean, sometimes like over the summer, it's like my day is not complete. I have not written 5,000 words. So
I love that, because that's a discipline. That's what it takes to get things done. That step-by-step process of 1,000 words a day. And I love your excitement about what you do as a writer, because I can see that. You remind me of my brother. He also writes too. And whenever he's doing something, he's like, oh, I want to share this with you. I want to do this with you. And I can see how he's so inspired by the creation that's appearing on the piece of paper. What are some speaking of books, what are some book recommendations that you would have for some other teens? Now, throw yours in there, please.
Well,
Definitely throw your books in there
my
because I
number
want
one
them
book
to read that.
recommendation for teens would be Never Dying by Shanti Hershenson. It's a really good
Okay.
book. If I do say so myself, it's really fun. Otherwise, like books, well, of course, You Won't Know Her Name by Shanti Hershenson is the other one. I wish I had it on me. It's like all the way over there. That's the book I wrote about bullying. Um, Sorry.
What was the name of that again? That book?
You Won't Know Her Name. I can feel my
You won't
headphones like
know her
falling.
name.
Yeah, that one
Uh,
is my most popular book. However, it probably won't be because Never Dying is very quickly approaching it. Um,
okay.
Otherwise, for books not written by me, my all-time favorite book is The Perks of Being a Wallflower. I love that book so much. It's a really good book for teenagers. It's a little sad. You might want to look up like trigger warnings and stuff because there's a lot of kind of disturbing stuff in it, but it's really, really good. My other favorite book is The Book Thief. I read that book in like 3 days when I was in seventh grade, and I had no idea that that's like irregular because it's a pretty long book. But it's so good. And then my favorite book series would be Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo or Six of Crows, also by Leigh Bardugo. She's my favorite author. I got to meet her the other day, and like my mom gave her my business card. It was like I screamed. I was like, "Mom, oh my god, what are you doing?"
I love it. So those are the book recommendations, everyone. And I love the fact that you have a number of books that you're pulling from or that you read from for inspiration. The Perks of Being a Wildflower sounds very interesting to me. And I like how you said to be cautious of the triggers that come up in that book. So if you are going to read that book, as Shanti has requested that be one of the books that she likes, then just be aware that that could happen. And if it does happen, make sure that you can talk to someone about your feelings. Like Shanti mentioned earlier, get some support, have a friend or someone you can talk to, and not just hold those feelings inside. Okay. So
Yeah, I
that
think.
is, yeah.
Oh, what were you gonna say? Sorry.
No, you can go ahead. Yeah.
Uh,
So what are you
yeah, I
wanting to
think
say?
trigger warnings in books are especially important because there's so many books out there, and a lot of books aren't properly labeled with what's in them. And there's very often, most books, there are going to be things that are going to bother people. I remember with You Won't Know Her Name, I had to put trigger warnings before each poem. I
Ooh.
might take that out at some point because I was just like a really cautious 13-year-old, and I was like, I don't want to bother anyone. But there's also like a trigger warning in the front of the book. So
Well, that's good that you're putting that. And I like the fact that you've
mhm.
said that. You're the first person that actually has said anything about trigger warnings in books. And I think this is important because there are things that can trigger us. And if you're listening to this today, which you are obviously, and you're wondering what a trigger warning or what a trigger is, that's something that causes you to feel something, or feel a certain way that may be from a past experience or something that has happened in the past that you have put down somewhere or maybe have buried or forgot about. And there's something that you have read, something someone says that causes that feeling and emotion to come back up. And when it's unaddressed and you feel even worse because you didn't know it was there and it was just being compiled by other emotions. So this trigger response that Shanti is talking about is very important for the young teens out here as you're reading books. And also to be mindful of who you are around. That also creates trigger responses and it can really cause you to feel a certain way. Speaking of being around certain people, Shanti, who do you surround yourself around? Like
So a
who's
lot of
in your life?
well, so of course I have my family and I have a twin sister.
Yeah,
Mostly everybody in my friend group are writers. That's really cool. So it's
that's
like we
good.
all go to the writing club at school together. And then my boyfriend is publishing his first book next month. So it's like I have a
Whoa,
ton of
congrats.
writers. Yeah.
Congrats. Does your twin sister, does she write?
Not as much as I do, but sometimes.
Okay. All right. Do you ever have ideas that you share with her and then she's like, oh, that's okay?
Not really.
Okay. Well, that's good. I'm glad you have a supporting group because it's important. You know, we are who we surround ourselves with, right? So there's a saying that you're the average sum of the people that you hang out with. So it's important that you surround yourself with writers because you are a writer and that you have a writing atmosphere. How has your family been with this process of you writing? Are they excited about your next book that you're working on? Are they keep a collection of all the books that you've created and all the things that you're doing?
Yeah, there's a bookshelf in the other room with all my books on it. Really, they've been extremely supportive through everything.
That's good.
I can't remember exactly the moment when, like, because here's the thing, I started writing my first novel without, like, telling them. And it
Mhm.
just kind of happened. So eventually, I was like, hey, I need to do this. I need to do this. Or I'm thinking about, like, querying for an agent, all this kind of stuff. And I was just telling them. And then I was like, hey, do you know anything about self-publishing? And they were like, no. And I ended up teaching them. So I kind of, it's weird because I've done like all of this myself. So I put my books on Amazon, I market myself, and then they're just here for support. And it's really nice because, I don't know, they were fairly surprised.
I love that. They were, it's funny that you said that because here's the thing. Once again, I want to go back to your age here. You're 15 and you are teaching your family about self-publishing. You are learning all these things on your own. And that goes back to, I believe, what your message is about no matter where you are or what your age is, you can do something great with your life. Yeah. And Shanti, you are living that purpose. And that's why I wanted you here on the show. Now, what are some things that you do for fun? I get your writing. I know you hang out with your friends, but what goes on in Shanti's world when she's not writing? What do you do?
So when I'm not writing, I like to play video games, and I want to. So in 2020, how I would answer this, it'd be like, oh yeah, I skateboard, but I haven't skateboarded since like 2021. But I was thinking of actually going to the skate park today because I'm not the best with physical activity. I get injured quite a bit, but skateboarding is actually the one thing that doesn't affect the injury I have now terribly. So I'm gonna try to really learn how to skateboard. And then I mentioned video games. I used to do free running, which is like parkour and gymnastics. However, I kept getting hurt, and I broke my wrist a few years ago, and it was causing me a bunch of problems. So I had to quit for a bit. But again, that's like something I want to get back into.
Okay. What is Beyblading? I know I mentioned that in my bio. What is that?
Is that from my...
Explain that to it.
That's from one of my I forget, that's still in my author bio because like I haven't touched a Beyblade in like 2 years now. But that's like a game of battling spinning tops that originated in Japan. From 4th to 7th grade, absolutely obsessed. Like, loved Beyblades, went to tournaments, won tournaments, so much fun. I haven't touched a Beyblade since, but I just kind of lost interest in it with like writing and all. But yeah, that was something I really enjoyed to do. It's a pretty creative, pretty fun game where you can like, customize these little tops and like play with them. And I used to really want to write a book inspired by it.
Okay, that may be something in the future that you may possibly do. But yeah, I was like, what is Beyblade? I've never heard of that before. But that's really cool. So you have some furry friends too. Who are some of your furry friends? Is it dogs, cats? What is it?
So I have 2 cats. Their names are Apollo and Eclipse, and they are not in here right now. Sometimes they come in and they crash my interviews, but unfortunately today isn't the day.
They're being polite.
Yeah, they're being polite. Yeah, I had Apollo once just sit on my computer, and I had to like move him.
I used to have a dog named Apollo. It was a Great Dane, and he was beautiful. Now, Apollo, is that inspired by the Greek god Apollo?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. And then, you're a writer, so I'm assuming. Yeah,
and then our other cat is Eclipse, and he's a beautiful like black cat. And then Apollo he's like a little muffin. He's adorable. He's tiny.
Do they get along?
Yeah, they're not by blood related, but they're like basically like litter mates. They like grew up together. They're like only a few weeks apart, I think.
Okay, so good buddies. I like that. All right, cats that get along. That's always good. Yeah. And speaking of cats, there's a lot of TikTok videos on cats and their personalities, which are really awesome. Now, I want to get back to speaking of TikTok here, the books. Now, you figured out a way to sell books or to promote books on TikTok. How did you go about doing that?
So I created a TikTok account about a year ago now with the release of You Won't Know Her Name. And I just went on there and I said, like, hey, I'm a teen author. I just published my 5th book. This is what it's about. And instantly I was met with a lot of support. What I found is there are a lot of course, teenagers who have TikTok, and there are a lot of teenagers who want to write books. And of course, that overlaps. And there's also a strong community of readers on TikTok. So being able to actually reach those target audiences is especially helpful. And what I found is just if I kept posting almost every day and answering people's questions and making videos based on what people wanted to hear, the followers would come in very quickly. Now I'm super close to 50,000 followers. I think I'm at like 45,000, 46,000 now. And I'm really hoping to reach that by the end of the year.
Incredible. So you hear that. Go to Shanti's TikTok account, follow and support and learn from what she's doing. Now, what is your handle for TikTok? That way they can follow you.
So my TikTok is at Shanti Who Writes.
At Shanti Who Writes. And I'll make sure I put that into the show notes of this podcast. That way they can click on that, Shanti, and follow you and to start learning more about what you're doing. Shanti, this has been absolutely wonderful. And I want to ask you one more question before we end this session today. What is a purposeful life to you? What does that look like?
So, a
Living a purposeful
purposeful
life.
life to me is doing what you love and being happy. I don't see purpose as doing something that you're unhappy with and always wanting to like change your job. I want to, from a young age, like to do what I love. That's always been how I am. I remember like when I was little, I was like, yeah, I want to be a writer. So in some ways, I'm like keeping that childhood dream. But yeah, like I feel like as long as I'm happy and I'm writing, I'm going to be okay. However, I also do think it would be really cool to like really make a huge impact. And that's also purpose to me. I want to be a famous writer. And I want to touch people with my writing. I want to help people. I want to teach people and just all of that.
Shanti, this is absolutely impressive. And you are going to be that writer, that eminent writer that people will talk about for the ages. And I'm going to make sure of that. I'm going to make sure we share your information, that people can get more in touch with you, that young teenagers can learn more about what you're doing. I want to thank you for showing up today. This is courage right here, Shanti. You're showing up. You shared your story and you were open and you were vulnerable. And I love that. And you're incredible as a person, as a human being. I want to tell you to keep doing what you're doing, keep shining your light.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. All right, Shanti, it's been a pleasure having you on the show, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Your Purposeful Life today, and I'm your host, Adrian Starks. Download this podcast on any platform of your choice by going to our website, yourpurposeful.life. Join me on my social media channels and be a part of the Your Purposeful Life community. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit that like button with a purpose. Let's help you shape your purpose your way.